the biggest weekend of the OTB regular season, and tonight we're here to walk you through the drama, the chaos, and the excitement in store for teams across the country as we head into Week 13 in the National Football League. From coast to coast, 10 teams have a realistic shot at making the postseason, and only one club has officially clinched a playoff berth. We have do-or-die elimination games, division titles up for grabs, and a points race separated by a razor's edge. Welcome to OTB Night in America. And welcome inside the broadcast booth, everyone. Sidebar here, my co-host, the League Nemesis, in just a minute. Well, after 12 weeks of football, after Thursdays, Sundays, Mondays, and this year even Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we've arrived. We've arrived at the biggest weekend in the OTB regular season, and let me tell you, the stakes have never been higher. As of tonight, 10 teams have realistic bids into our postseason. But in just a few days after a few final lineup decisions, only 6 clubs will get their ticket stubs punched to the dance. Only 6 clubs will play another week of meaningful fantasy football in 2020. In a year where a lot has gone wrong, at least one thing continues to be right. OTB is, in my estimation, the greatest fantasy football league on the planet. And it's weeks like these where we can all come together and talk up this ridiculously confusing playoff picture that I'm never more thankful to have each and every one of you. So, Garcia, before we attempt to unravel our playoff picture as best as we can, welcome, and who are you planning to jinx tonight?
What's up, Dave? I didn't realize this was actually a show. I thought we were doing a virtual ugly sweater thing for the holidays, so my bad. Guess I'm a little bit overdressed, but I'm excited about greatest show on paper. The two-headed monster. These guys have shown such ability to just withstand everything that comes their way. Heartbreaking losses, injuries, questionable trade offers, questionable free agent waiver wire acquisitions. They are on a hot streak, and I just looked at the roster again to just kind of do a double take. And, in many ways, you and I probably thought we'd be in their shoes, kind of felt like they were in our neck of the woods when it started the season, where they were just putrid like us. And they were able to break from the pack. And I don't see how they're going to be stopped. The Southern California kid out there with the Chargers, Justin Herbert, a beautiful duo of Chubb and Jones in the running back situation. Once Michael Evans obviously comes off the bye week into the playoff season, that's going to be another weapon there to get him all the way to the top. So I'm going with greatest show on paper. They're going to, 2 championships in 3 years. That's impressive. Not as impressive as that guy back there or what I'm wearing, but nonetheless impressive.
Well, you heard it here. Greatest show on paper. Garcia's new pick to win it all. It would be 2 times in 3 years, which is not, I suppose, as impressive as Cincinnati's back-to-back titles at that point, but it would be almost.
No, it's not, because the thing that's impressive about greatest show on paper doing it is because this guy was like, or these guys were 0-12, I think, last year. So, they went from worst to first in some aspects. So, all credit to Aaron and what he was able to do. And we shouldn't overlook that, because we seem to all the time. And I feel bad for the guy. He's won back-to-back. He's the only one to ever say that. And yet, we don't give him his credit. So maybe we should create an award for him and overlooking it season after season. I feel bad for the guy now.
That's true. We do our best, but obviously, it's only relevant with what has happened most recently. And so we have long since forgotten what happened 4 years ago. Okay, so here's what we're going to do tonight. It's going to feel a lot like the other OTBs in 10. We're going to try to unravel the playoff picture best as we can. There are some things that look complicated that are actually simpler, and we'll talk you through those. There are some things that look complicated, and they are complicated. We'll do our best to commiserate and unravel the best we can. But we're actually going to start in an order that I think will hopefully simplify things, and that is with the division races. Okay, so we'll start with this. Sweet Home Chicago, as you can see, I'm going to have it wrong because the camera's flipped, but Sweet Home Chicago, you see that asterisk on their name in the bottom lower third. That means they've clinched. They are your Gardens Division champion. We probably haven't spent enough time talking about this squad because they've actually just been, everyone else has been in their rearview mirror for the last 4 weeks or so, but a back-to-back division title win. I mean, that is really something that is hard to do in this league, let alone make the playoffs 2 years in a row, but to win the division, especially after such a heartbreaking Super Bowl loss. So that is your Gardens Division champ. We're going to go to the Fairways Division, where things look complicated, but actually are not. So if you were to open up your app today, you would have seen that the Fairways race looks pretty convoluted, looks pretty murky. You've got PTT as the one, and then you've got 4 other clubs tied at 6 and 6. Here's why this is actually not that difficult. PTT and Waverman play each other this week. So, the number 2 seed, the winner of the Fairways Division, the team that will get a automatic bid to the Final Four, will either be PTT or Waverman for this very simple reason. If PTT wins that game, they will have 8 wins, and nobody else in the division can get to them. If Waverman wins, well, look at the point total. I mean, I guess it's possible that Greatest Show eclipses them by 100, but we are going to assume that does not happen because it's something that's never happened before. So if Waverman wins, effectively they will be 7 and 6. That will be the best record in that division. They will have the tiebreaker, which is points on everybody. And that means it's as simple as this. Week 13 is a do-or-die elimination for the number 2 seed, the Fairways Division seed, which is PTT and Waverman. And so that leads me to ask you, Garcia, who do you like in this elimination game this week? PTT versus Waverman. And before you answer, I should say one more thing. Doesn't mean PTT still can't make the playoffs if he loses. More on that later. I'm talking just about the division. The number 2 seed, whoever wins that game will get it. So anyway, Garcia, what do you make of that? Who do you have?
Waverman comes to me as the smartest guy in the room. Well, second smartest guy to Shipman. He's got Brian Hill because he sees his opponent has Gurley, and there's a good chance Gurley may not play. He's kind of questionable, so there's an injury concern there. So he's got Brian Hill as the backup to Gurley. So he's thinking to himself, hey, I'll have the backup. I've got myself situated here. But then I look further down the roster, and he's got a New York Jet on his roster. And he's got Thielen, a phenomenal standout receiver for the Vikings, on his bench. So maybe he's not the second smartest guy in the room.
Well, I think Thielen did have COVID last week, though.
Roster situation right now. I like Waverman. Wilson's done it all season long. The guy just keeps putting up huge numbers. You cannot overlook the fact that it's just been impressive. Don't think they'll beat your record, but nonetheless, Waverman's got a pretty potent lineup up and down, despite some of the head-scratching moves. Right now, things could change between now and Sunday. PTT's got too many questionable players on the roster. Thomas has got a questionable mark right now. Gurley, like I mentioned earlier. I think he's got a few bye week players too that probably better to have this week, kind of going in. Again, I assume PTT's chances are better to make the playoffs than, say, you and I, so he can't feel too bad if he puts up some solid numbers, which he's done consistently. But when it comes to a flip the coin, I'm going to go Waverman this week. So I put my money on Waverman. I was a betting man.
Well, a couple things to unpack here, and I think, again, if you're going to look at it across the entire season, the answer would be, well, Waverman's going to win this game. Waverman, after all of the ridiculous bad beats earlier in the year, they got everybody's biggest week for like the first 6 weeks, dug themselves this crazy hole. I can't even say they dug the hole themselves. It was just kind of placed and they stepped into it. After all that, they can do what they should have been able to do all year, which is elevate to a Final Four bid. That's all you'd want. Win the division, get the Final Four bid. If it was really about the entire year, you would say, of course, it's going to be Waverman. But look, it's any given week, right? I mean, obviously, PTT got dealt a difficult blow by losing Fuller. That's a big loss because Will Fuller had been very consistent, and obviously after that huge Thanksgiving Day game, that's a big miss. But, you still have, Josh Allen and Kelsey and Watkins. You've got guys that can, Michael Thomas, guys that can just, blow up week to week. So there's enough firepower there. And, you've got Seattle this week against the Giants. Interesting matchup there. The Giants defense has been better than what their record might indicate, but still it feels like a compelling matchup for his two players. And then, of course, you've got a New York Jets starting in that lineup. As you said, anything you'd like to add about the idea that the Fairways Division winner will have a New York Jet starting for him this week?
What is there to say? I mean, it's sacrilegious to fantasy football to have a New York Jet on a roster and be basically the division title winner. So it's unearthing. It's very concerning that something like that could possibly happen. But I have hope that Carl will come to his wits and get Mr. Mims off that active roster. Yeah. As evidenced by last week, when I do get a text message expecting 160 yards and some 2-touchdown performance. I think he was shy by a lot.
That sounds about right. Okay, so we will move from the Fairways Division. Again, that was a little easier than maybe what you would think when you look at the playoff picture. Now let's talk about something that's decidedly just as complicated as it looks, and that are the points-based seeds. We're going to skip over the 3-4 and 5-4 now. Don't worry, we will get to it. But again, we think the easiest way to do this is to simplify by showing you the outer edges to start. So let's look at that points race, and here's what you need to know about it. So all aboard the baby bus right now is your 6 seed. That is what you would call kind of your lowest point threshold by which to break into the 6 seed right now is currently housed by all aboard the baby bus. But Gronk TDs, wristbands, and regulators, particularly Gronk TDs and wristbands, but regulators and even Cincinnati are within earshot of that total. That is certainly a total, a margin that could be taken over in 1 week. Those are your, let's say, 3 to 5 teams that are currently in the mix for the number 6 seed. Here's what you need to know about the playoff picture. One of these teams will make it in. That is absolutely certain. We'll show you why in a little bit. But one of these teams will make it in. It's actually quite possible that 2 teams on this list could make it in. And although it's I will admit, a rare possibility, there's a chance 3 teams on this list could make it in. So again, remember, all aboard the baby bus has that lead. And I love this because think about it this way. All year when we text a lot, and I always tell you when you're having a bad week, hey man, every touchdown counts. Hey, you just got this on a Sunday night or this on a Monday night. This is why every single touchdown counts, every single point, even on a bad week. Look at that margin of error, 8 points between all aboard the baby bus and Gronk TDs. I mean, we're talking about one start somewhere, right? One bench player that you were wrong about or right about. That's the margin in this league. It's quite incredible. So Garcia, here's my question to you, and we're going to make this a little more complicated in a second. But here's my question to you. Of these 5 teams, we'll say, really the top 4 is what we're focused on. Who do you see as winning this race? If you had to pick one, you can pick 2 if you want. But if you had to pick one, who'd you pick?
It's tough because each have their qualities, and then many of them have their not so qualities. Shipwreck's team, when you look at that roster, they don't have really a dynamic player for that matter. They're kind of more like a role team. They've got just a bunch of role players, and yet they keep defying the odds. So I don't know what to expect out of Shipwreck week in, week out. When you have a team that has Tannehill as your quarterback, it's just one of those things where you're not going to expect, 30, 40-point performance. You're going to probably get a solid 20, which you may just need just to kind of eclipse that seeding. I love all aboard the baby bus. I mean, he's got Mahomes and he's got Dalvin Cook. If he had a 3rd superstar on that team, I would give him the crown now. Like Devontae Adams would have been a perfect complement to that team. But he doesn't. He's got about 12 other Eagles that he chooses from and rotates week in, week out. So he should be called all aboard the Eagle bus instead of all aboard the baby bus. But I'm a big fan of all aboard the baby bus, Mahomes and Dalvin Cook, the 1-2 punch week in, week out. I know he probably was a little concerned last week with Cook and the injury, but he still came back. So my money's on all aboard the baby bus. And then I think of the others, I think regulators, unfortunately, is going to be on the outside looking in just because the injuries just beset his team. I know he's getting a few players back this week, but that's just kind of tough. It's not, not having McCaffrey and Carson just, is questionable every second of the day. So that's tough for him. So I guess it pains me to say that it's probably going to be wristbands.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. they always say that you can't win your fantasy league in the first 2 rounds. Well, All Aboard the Baby Bus is doing his best to prove that is not the case. Now, he does have some complimentary players, and we don't want to dismiss that. But it is clear that Patrick Mahomes and Dalvin Cook have been the bulk of his surge since, midway through the year when he really started coming on strong. It was those two players having historic weeks, seemingly every week. So All Aboard the Baby Bus maybe wants to try to buck that conventional wisdom that it is impossible to win your fantasy league in the first 2 rounds. What strikes me about these teams, and I'll put this up so I can kind of underscore this point, is that there's really no consistency here. Okay, so of the last 4 weeks, a different one of those 4 squads has led this group in total points, and a different one of these squads has been the worst of the 4. So it's tough for me to really, for sure what to expect. Now, here's the thing. Regulators at that 121 mark, I could be wrong about this. I believe that was the one random week he got Christian McCaffrey back. I think. I could be wrong about that. But I think that can also show you the struggles he's had with the injuries, and certainly with C-Mac being out, but also Mostert and Chris Carson for an extended period of time. That has hampered him. WB has shown us that he can do it. The lineup is clearly capable of putting up points, but as you can see by this board, there's a lot of hit or miss there. It would look to me like this is probably an All Aboard the Baby Bus and Gronk TD's, fight. Gronk TD's obviously hasn't gotten what he wanted out of Lamar Jackson, to a lesser extent Mark Andrews, but particularly Lamar Jackson this year. And so that's obviously been an issue, but he still has guys, and James Conner, I would say to an extent, has been somewhat disappointing, but he has guys that can still put up big points, week to week. I will say this, there's a couple of things I want to mention about the point seeds for those that are looking to get into it. 2 things to consider. One, and I'll put it back up, remember that you're not just trying to jump one team, right? So the further down you go, the harder it becomes, right? Because if you're, let's say, regulators, and you want to jump, All Aboard the Baby Bus, clearing him by 30 points actually doesn't sound that complicated. But then remember, you got to clear wristbands by 20. And then remember, you got to clear Gronk TDs by 25. So it adds up. That's the problem. But there is kind of a record backdoor that could help some of these teams. We'll get to that in a second. The other thing I want to say is, remember, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes ago when I said that PTT losing this week may not be the nail in the coffin? Okay. If PTT were to lose, he would be 7-6. But look at where he'd be if he was in it in the points race. Okay, so currently the number 2 seed, right? But if he were to lose this week and go to 7-6, depending on his point total, let's say he puts up big points this week and he loses to Waverman, very possible. He's also in the mix here for a points-based seed, potentially even a record-based seed. So this is that area that I said to you where it's complicated, and it actually is complicated. Nothing I can do about that. All I can say is, remember, obviously it's the top 4 teams on record and the next 2 teams that'll be on points. We're going to get to the overall picture in a second, but there's no doubt that it is complicated. And a couple other things just to say, I'm sure, Garcia, you'll love to chime in with this one. A couple of things that would be novel this year. Gronk TDs is looking to avoid being the first team to start 3-0 and miss the playoffs. WB looking to avoid the first team starting 5-1 and missing the playoffs. So I'm sure you have plenty to offer because you jinxed them both. I think that's probably what happened here.
Yeah, I should start playing lotto, I guess, with all the luck I have in terms of my predictions. But the thing with wristbands is he was your guy. He was all you, and it's funny. Am I the one who's jinxing everybody, or are you jinxing people?
Well, I'll tell you this. For me, obviously, I had one of the worst drafts in OTB. I missed on a lot of the guys that I was hopeful for.
Oh, you didn't miss. You didn't miss.
Okay. No. Here's the thing. So I missed.
No,
I missed.
Who says you missed?
I missed on some guys.
Isn't on your roster anymore.
Okay.
You didn't miss.
I missed.
You didn't miss.
Okay. Here's why I bring that up. I'm not trying to pivot to me. I'm trying to make a story about WB. When I pivoted, I needed to go after receivers, right? You can't rebuild your squad in OTB, such a deep league, on running backs. It's impossible. Like, there's just not enough high-caliber running backs there. You get lucky on a few handcuffs, maybe, but that's it. So I pivoted, and I went to wide receivers. Now, I'm not trying to say that my group of receivers is commensurate with WB's. It's not. WB has a better slew of receivers. My point is that when I pivoted and started 5 wide receivers every week, what I quickly noticed is why I like the running back focus squads. My goodness, every single week you could get 2 points out of a receiver, with 1 target, or you could get 40 points out of a receiver with 10 targets. It's a different game plan every week. There is like maybe 3 receivers you can count on in this entire NFL. Everybody else is a crapshoot week to week. That, I think, is what the issue has been for WB, right? Is that he's got a heavy receiver squad. They're good receivers, but even a Cooper Kupp, even a Chris Godwin, and obviously he lost Kittle too, but those receivers that are even the good ones, they can still put up duds. That's the big issue with that lineup structure, and I think that's what's obviously... Now, granted, he could still come out and put up 140 this week, but that's the issue with the lineup structure.
I think it's odd that you and I are like critiquing teams who are like so far ahead of us and have kicked our ass all season long. I mean, at least I give credit to teams like all aboard the baby bus. I mean, I'm a little bit more supportive of the work they do. I might have a personal vendetta here and there to some people who traded, individuals to your squad because of the fact that they're just, don't understand the object of the game is to beat you and have you be miserable.
Sure.
When we do these shows, it seems as if when you talk about your team, you talk at a pace and you talk at just a level of where you're trying to convince yourself that they weren't bad draft picks. It just was bad luck, or the data was wrong, or some voting machine kind of got screwed up. Or, it's one of those weird things. It's like a therapy session for you.
No, listen, I said it and I'll say it again. I missed on guys that I believed in, chief among them Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins, who I thought were going to break out earlier this year. I mean, or at all, I guess maybe is the right way of saying it.
I'm still waiting.
But I'm not. I own it. It is what it is. I was wrong. I'm surprised.
It's fine. I mean, we're allowed to miss. I mean, I missed on Devin Singletary. You missed on a lot of guys. But the thing is, you also were able to get yourself back into a situation by hoodwinking a couple of guys and getting like Tyreek Hill, who had like 500 points last week. And I hope Ian sees that number and realizes the fact that, boy, he could really use Tyreek Hill as just kind of a safety net as he goes into his title run, year 2, in an attempt to win and carry that lovely trophy that we don't actually distribute. But maybe that's something we can put in for next year.
As I've said to some people this year, if my indelible quality to OTB in 2020 was to simply take Tyreek Hill off of the best team's roster and take Juju off of Waverman and give him Jonathan Taylor, I guess I've done something. But that's about all I've done this year. Now let's move to the playoff.
If it's done something, it's to never trade with you. That's what it's done to your team to learn.
Oh, that is fair. One other thing I should mention, because $100 is on the line this coming week, so I should mention this before we get to the playoff picture. The regular season points race. You'll see it on the bottom of the screen here. Waverman has a lead on Sweet Home Chicago, but as you saw by both teams' point totals last week, that lead is far from impossible to surpass. They've got, if I can do math, 23-ish points of a margin. Very easily overtaken, potentially, but very interesting. Obviously, $100 to the regular season points title winner. I should also mention, for those that are interested, Waverman is about 150-ish, maybe a little more than 150 points clear away from Sidebar's record last year, PPR record. So they could do it. They are capable of putting together that week. Probably that record is safe. So we'll find out. But let's move on to the playoff picture. The moment I think we've all been waiting for. I will do my best to now put it all together and show you what we are looking at. Okay, so here is my way of trying to simplify our playoff picture moving into Week 13. Sweet Home Chicago is technically the only team that has officially clinched, and they have officially clinched the number 1 seed, the Gardens Division champion, back-to-back. Congratulations to them. Remember that seeding does matter because as the 1 seed, they will play the lowest remaining seed in the Final Four. So it does matter, whether you're the 1 or the 2. It's not that you just get to the Final Four. You also technically maybe are playing the lesser team, perhaps, if that's such a thing. PTT, we talked about that. That's your 2 seed. However, PTT and Waverman will decide what that 2 seed looks like by the end of Week 13. Now, you'll notice that I have put yellow around Waverman and Greatest Show on paper. I have done that because I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to put them in the same colors as Sweet Home Chicago because mathematically that's not true. However, they are so far ahead of all the other teams on points, obviously, particularly Waverman, but even Greatest Show on paper, that it is very improbable that they will not make the playoffs given their current point standing. So as you're trying to figure out your way in, remember that Waverman and Greatest Show on paper, they're going to be there. I don't know where they're going to be, but they're almost assuredly going to be there. So know that when you're trying to jockey for position. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Shipwreck, we haven't talked about them that much. They are your 3 seed. They are sitting in a record-based seed. Based on their point margin away from the other teams, the only way Shipwreck's in is if they win this week. Because if you think about it, there's no way that they could score so many points to get in at 7-6 and also lose, right? Like, it'd be impossible. So Shipwreck is going to have to win this week to get in. They play all aboard the baby bus, so more on that in a second. But if you're looking for a way in, obviously most people might be rooting for Waverman to get up into the 2 seed because that obviously means PTT becomes fair game for people to jockey. That might be the one thing you're rooting for. The second thing certainly is rooting, Ship, against Ship. If you're not Ship, you're rooting against Ship because they are controlling a seed, completely in control. It doesn't matter if they put up 70, if All Aboard the Baby Bus puts up 68, they will win the game, they will get in. So they are the one that's kind of in the fullest control in the 3, 4, 5, and 6 seed. After that, Greatest Show on paper and All Aboard the Baby Bus round out your 5 and your 6 seed. But remember this, Greatest Show on paper, also 6 and 6, right? So if they win this week at 7 and 6, there's a chance, depending on what happens in the 3, 4 spot, they could elevate as well. Now, whether that is good or bad for you, it depends on who you are. If you're a team like WB or Regulators, maybe you're not rooting for that because at 7 and 6, you can still get into a 3 or 4 seed yourself if the right things go your way. Remember that you're also competing in that track as well. If you're a Gronk TDs at 5 and 7, or if you're a Cincinnati at 5 and 7, well, in that case, you are rooting for Greatest Show on paper to get the heck out of that seed because that will give you another point seed. Your only way in is at points at that point because of your record. So that will give you, it will free up another spot, so to speak. And that's why I was saying that 2, even 3 of those clubs, depending on what happens in the ship contest, could actually, and the PTT one, could actually find their way in week 13. So we'll get back to this broader picture in the moment, but Garcia, obviously now this means Shipwreck versus All Aboard the Baby Bus is a playoff game. It is 100% a playoff game this week. All Aboard the Baby Bus could lose and still get in, I should say that. But Shipwreck needs to win to get in. The question is, who do you like, Shipwreck versus All Aboard the Baby Bus this week?
I'm all about the All Aboard the Baby Bus, man. Putting my money on those guys. So, again, Dalvin Cook, Pat Mahomes, Frankie's got a jet on his roster, so hopefully he'll wake up and make that change, and hopefully he didn't lose his other phone in the Chesapeake Bay, so that he can make that change quickly. But, again, Shipwreck, yeah, it's impressive what you're doing. It's quality players, but nothing dynamic. This is all about dynamic, having dynamic players. So,
I'll tell you this.
I, of course, don't know what that is either, but All Aboard the Baby Bus has dynamic players. 2 dynamic players. He could have had a 3rd dynamic player with Devontae Adams, but he didn't.
He didn't.
So here he is.
He didn't want to trade his whole draft.
Players and a bunch of Eagles.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'll put the graphic up on the screen, and I will say, 4th and 10th seems like this giant margin in points, but what really is that the first 3 teams are just super far away, I should say, from everybody else. The difference is actually about 70 points. That's not nothing. I mean, obviously that's a very tough margin to make up, in 1 week. So I'm not saying it's not nothing, but it's also a little bit misleading when you look at it from that standpoint. Look, we just talked about it. All Aboard the Baby Bus lives and dies effectively-ish on 2 players. When those 2 players come through, they can put up big points. When those 2 players don't come through, they can still put up points. You would still think that Shipwreck will need a 100-point game to beat them, but it's very much dependent on what those 2 players do. It's funny. If I had to pick, I'm gonna pick Shipwreck. I'm gonna pick Shipwreck because I feel like I don't have any other reason. I don't have a roster.
You do not like All Aboard the Baby Bus because he's an Eagles fan. You've always had this against Frankie, so go ahead, go with Shipwreck, whatever.
I'm gonna say this.
You've been on this all season, even to like 5 years ago. It's this whole Eagle Giant thing. It has nothing to do with you, Alex. So he's only just rooting for you because of the fact that he doesn't like the Eagles, which is an association with Frankie. So I would really take that as like supportive if I'm Alex.
I will say this. It's more just the history of this franchise. Shipwreck has been in this situation like 5 times. I'm actually exaggerating because they've dominated a lot and just made their way in easily too. But it's at least been 2 or 3 times where they've made the playoffs in this do or die situation. They needed to win a game. They had to run the table. They had to win like 3 or 4 straight, like 3 or 4 years ago. And they did it. This year, they had at 5-5, they were bleak. It was looking like it was out. I said it on this broadcast. I said Shipwreck controls their own fate. If they win their 3 straight, they're going to get in. And here they are, 2 in, knocking on the door. So I'm going to pick Ship because Ship figures it out. I don't know how. I'm not going to say that the roster this or the roster that or this point. No, I'm just going to say Ship's going to figure it out. Now, Frankie could still get in. Look at that point total. Could still get in. But I'm going to say that Shipwreck will be your 3 seed at the end of week 13. That's right. That's what I'm going to say. Oh, I think I lost Garcia for a second. He was so upset. He was so upset about the idea that I was picking Ship over All Aboard the Baby Bus.
Hey,
He's back. He's back.
I'm here.
I thought you were that upset.
I might have been the governor calling me, asking what I'm doing.
Okay, well, so I'm going to put the playoff picture up one more time. We're a couple minutes away from ending this wonderful show. But I'm going to, again, try to just clean this up the best I can to let everybody know this is what you're looking for this week. So, Chicago, you're in, you're 1 seed. You can rest your players this week for all you want, although you do have a chance at getting 10 wins, which would tie the league record held by like 5 other people for most wins in an OTB season. PTT and Waverman, that's your competition playing for your 2 seed. The loser of that game might still very well be in the playoffs. Certainly Waverman will be. PTT might still too, depends on the points. Shipwreck, winning in. That's your 3 seed. If they lose, again, just because of their point total, odds are very strongly that they will not be in that race anymore. Greatest Show on paper could still be in the record-based seeds depending on a win. They are clogging up a points-based seed as we speak. All Aboard the Baby Bus is your 6 seed, and then you can see where it goes. Cincinnati could also be thrown in about 57 points away from Frankie. But right now, those are the 3 clubs above them that we're really looking at that have a very good chance of having a big week and getting back in. So again, the thing that I will just end on is if you are playing your matchup and you're a 6-6 team, you win. That's your first thing. It can never hurt to win. Win your game. It should winnow the field of who you're competing out for that 3 and 4 seed. If you lose, or if you win and you put up big points, then you still have a way in. It could be a points-based seed. But winning is always paramount, and then checking to see if you can get in another way. If you're Gronk TDs or if you're Cincinnati, it don't matter at all. If you win or lose this week, makes no bit of difference. For you, it's going to be all about points. Can you get in, and can other teams either fall or shuffle so that it makes your path easier? Garcia, final thoughts as we head into an exciting Week 13.
I'm just disappointed that we didn't go over the consolation playoff format because there's just some riveting storylines there. I guess maybe in the next week's show we'll dive more into it because I'm assuming by then nobody really is going to pay attention because the playoffs will be set and all the drama will be over with. But hey, it's great we've gotten to this week, considering everything that the NFL season in its entirety has gone through. Hopeful that we can keep the momentum going and actually finish the season. So I wish everyone well, except for you, because I'm playing against you, and I never really wish you well in football or any type of competition. So with that said, I look forward to beating you with your own people that you dropped over the course of the year.
Good luck starting Daniel Jones this week, I think, is the best.
He may or may not be in the starting lineup, but I could come up with some surprises between now and Sunday. I guess I should just go on the app and see who's available as a quarterback to play in this riveting rivalry that we have going on. And I look forward to sweeping this year, 2020, taking both weeks.
I will say this. I don't really want to think about that. Although I'd like to get to 7-6 and beat you in the process. That would be fun. I'm not.
The disappointing situation here is the fact that you not being in the playoffs takes away all the enjoyment we have of the playoff season because then we can't root for you to get all the way to the final and lose. It's just going to be a shame.
Well, look, you can root for other teams because here's what's interesting about the playoff picture right now. Off the top of my head, I think there's only 2 teams. Oh, 3 teams. 3 teams? 3 teams that have won before, so maybe it'll end up being split. I guess I can still say there's a good chance that it will be a newbie winning it all? Will it be Sweet Home Chicago after a treacherous Super Bowl, coming back, winning it all? Will it be Shipwreck or Waverman, clubs that are there every single year? Can they break through? Can they have the Sidebar 2019 moment and break through finally? Hopefully they won't have a Sidebar 2020 in 2021 if they win. I will say that. But hopefully they can break through. Can Greatest Show on Paper repeat? Can PTT repeat? I mean, there's a lot of drama and intrigue. And I got to tell you, knowing that this is probably the last time, I have a feeling about 6 of you will probably be a little less interested next week. So this might be the last time I have all of you on a virtual stream or recording thereafter to say, really appreciate you. I don't know if you know this. We actually set a record this year, the least amount of inactives started in OTB in the history of the league. And I find that to be awesome because 2020 has been an absolute cluster. And everybody lives busy lives. Even we can love this, and yet we can still have, no time for it sometimes. With COVID and injuries and scheduling and postponements, all this stuff. This would be the year that an IR would slip through, and you would almost not fault them for it. Kudos to OTB. I tell you, we raise the stakes every single year. A few weeks ago, I was talking about how, the points are not where they maybe should be for the teams at the top. That's because the teams at the bottom, the teams in the middle, everybody's pulling along because it really is a competitive league week in and week out. Now, last thing I will say. Remember, as I said, that in the future, meaning starting next week and in the playoffs, I have to manually go in and change because the NFL Fantasy obviously ain't got time to have a custom playoff format like we do up in the system. So remember, if you turn on your app and you happen to wake up before me on Tuesday or you happen to just get in there before me, know that what you see on Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever the Week 13 season's over, will probably be wrong. We'll have to adjust the 5 and 6 seeds, and then that's true in the next round too, because again, lowest seed plays the highest seed, so I usually have to switch it in the final 4 as well. But I think that's all I had to say. Garcia, final thoughts as we close out this wonderful live stream.
I got nothing, man. I got nothing.
Well, he's Garcia out on the West Coast. If you still have questions, please feel free to text them our way. I'm not sure I'll be able to answer them any better than I did tonight. But again, appreciate you guys. Best of luck in Week 13. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a fun one. We will be back next Wednesday. I don't remember. Whatever day the Week 13 is over, the day after. We will be back to talk more OTB in 10. Thank you again for jumping on, and best of luck to all the teams in contention in Week 13.